following is a special documentary presentation of News 4.
A day at the office at the Murrah Federal Building.
Which collections department?
Well, you gotta have your pictures done.
This is Colleen. There's Claudette.
Hi!
Oh, I'm sorry. Claudine's here.
I'm here too, stupid.
About a third of the building has been blown away.
They appear like a family on home video, and to Timothy McVeigh, they were one family, belonging to the federal government.
Daycare's one here in Oklahoma City.
What gives anybody the right to come into our country and kill our children?
A nation would quickly find out it was not an attack by a foreign terrorist, but rather a planned bombing by a former Army sergeant from Western New York who had declared war on his own government.
He was like a soldier on a mission, and he was trying to strike out at the U.S. government, and in his mind, he's accomplished his mission.
Let's move these people.
I feel personally violated because they chose this city. Our innocence was lost in a sense whenever that bomb exploded here.
He didn't look like a foreigner. He looked like everybody else. That's why he's so scary.
Tonight, Rich Newberg reports loss of innocence, the Oklahoma City bombing, and the execution of Timothy McVeigh.
This morning, Timothy McVeigh was put to death. His execution came a little more than 6 years after he took the lives of 168 innocent people. At one time, he was our neighbor. So who was Timothy McVeigh, and why did he consider his own government the enemy? And will his execution really bring closure to the nation's deepest wounds? Tonight, we search for answers.
Timothy James McVeigh has been executed by lethal injection.
The Pendleton native who had gone from good neighbor to terrorist soldier, taking the lives of 168 people, became the first federal prisoner to be executed in the United States in 38 years. One witness to the execution, CBS correspondent Byron Pitts, says when the curtains opened and he saw McVeigh strapped to the gurney, both sides of the man were revealed.
In the beginning, I saw the Tim McVeigh that Bill McVeigh, his father, talked about so often. At that point, he just seemed like a young man in a bad situation. Moments later, when he turned to look at the news media, that's when he became Tim McVeigh, the soldier.
The soldier who claimed to be the master of his fate. Even as he approached death, he sought to take control of the death room.
But the most chilling part of this was the fact, for me at least, that he took the time to look up and look at each of us in the eye, and there was almost a sense of pride as he nodded his head, laid back down, and seemed very resigned to his fate.
And for his victims, no apology.
What I was hoping for, and I'm sure most of us was, is that we could see some kind of maybe I'm sorry, you know, something like that, but you know, we didn't get anything from his fate.
In Oklahoma City, another chapter is closed.
But this man clearly deserved what he got. He died peacefully, which I cannot say. My 3 members of my family did. And he died without any statement.
Those against the death penalty staged a silent protest. Those in favor of it counted down the seconds.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Though he may have considered himself unconquered, he paid the ultimate price for his actions and will now have his place in history as America's most notorious terrorist.
Well, am I pure evil? Am I the face of terror sitting here in front of you?
His face may not have reflected terror, but his actions were certainly those of a terrorist.
The explosion went off around 9.
What causes a child to grow up to be a terrorist? There were certainly no hints in the early years of Timothy McVeigh's life in rural Niagara County.
The Tim that I watched grow up and, you know, come to really care very deeply about was just a very caring, nice, responsible kid. And to see him in the role of a terrorist, it just doesn't fit.
The first glimpse of a stoic Timothy McVeigh wearing orange prison garb sent chills through America, but his sister Jennifer insisted the media was out to portray her brother as a monster.
I think he's been unfairly demonized. He's just a normal person. He's not this evil thing they're painting him to be. He's like you and I, you know, and...
Timothy McVeigh's quiet rural hometown of Pendleton was actually founded by a man who also hated the federal government. Sylvester Pendleton Clark has been described as an early 19th century tax protester whose unfulfilled dream was to start his own republic on Grand Island. Tim had two sisters and was especially close with Jennifer.
We used to go different places in the summer with the family. We'd go to Darien Lake almost every year, run a camper, and each of the kids would take a friend. And
the McVeigh house was often a gathering place for neighborhood children.
Sometimes in the summer where I'd come home from work and there'd be 15 kids in the pool. We had lots of friends. The kids had their friends. It's a wonderful neighborhood to grow up in. The whole town of Pendleton is like that.
Tim was viewed as kind and trustworthy, and often babysat for his neighbors' younger children.
I know whenever I had seen him, he was good. I'd be proud if he'd been my son. He was that type of fella.
Tim was especially close with his grandfather, Ed McVeigh.
Timmy spent quite a bit of time at Grandpa's house. My mother died in 1972, and after that, Dad just was with the kids all the time. Take them over to his house, take them grocery shopping. He's always with them, and kids love to go over there. Every Halloween, when we took the kids trick and treat, first place we go is both grandpas.
It was Grandpa McVeigh who would introduce Tim to guns at an early age, always teaching his grandson to respect firearms and to use them safely.
So he went and he joined Tonawanda Sportsman's Club and used to go over there and shoot. He'd target shoot it. By the time he got over there, he had another rifle or two, and by then he had his pistol. And
but the McVeigh family was beginning to unravel. Bill and Tim's mother, Mildred, were divorced by the time Tim graduated from high school. The split would take an emotional toll on Tim, who would later grow distant from his mother. Timothy McVeigh decided to join the Army and wound up fighting in Desert Storm in the Persian Gulf. Many believe that's when his ideas against the federal government began to take shape. McVeigh became a sergeant and decorated war hero, receiving the Bronze Star and the Combat Medal. He became an expert gunner on a Bradley armored vehicle and killed 2 Iraqi soldiers with a direct hit. McVeigh watched the upper body of one of the soldiers explode. He soon would begin seeing the U.S. government as a bully.
I went over there hyped up, just like everyone else. Not only is Saddam evil, all Iraqis are evil. What I experienced, though, was an entirely different ballgame. And being face-to-face, close with these people, in personal contact, you realize they're just people like you.
But even as he says he was losing his motivation as a soldier, McVeigh tried out for the Green Berets in the Army's elite special forces. He had been physically and emotionally run down from the war experience and ended up dropping out of the competition and took an honorable discharge from the Army.
I'm sure something didn't feel right in me, but I couldn't quantify it. I couldn't say what it was.
In a letter to the Union Sun and Journal in Lockport, McVeigh said, "America is in serious decline," ending the letter with, "Do we have to shed blood to reform the current system? I hope it doesn't come to that, but it might."
he used to despise it when Janet Reno or Clinton come on TV. He just hated it. I noticed that when he got out of the Army that many things he said when TV shows on and stuff that he didn't appreciate the government, some of the things they were doing. Before that, I never noticed it.
McVeigh, who had become a gun expert and attended gun shows, had been influenced by a fictitious book called The Turner Diaries, about a man who uses a truck bomb to destroy the FBI building in Washington because of the government's increasingly restrictive laws against gun owners. During a 1992 Ruby Ridge, Idaho standoff between FBI agents and white supremacist Randy Weaver, a man agents had hoped would become an informant, Weaver's wife and young son were killed. The FBI said it was an accident. McVeigh was incensed.
Federal agents taking on the role of judge, jury, and executioner. And then to further add insult to injury, you have these people, these federal agents, not held accountable. They become immune from the law.
8 months later, federal agents laid siege to the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas. More than 70 people inside, including 24 children, died in a fire that erupted.
Just arrived today.
McVeigh had earlier been drawn to the scene of the standoff and was captured on videotape by a local news crew. Later on 60 Minutes, McVeigh described his reaction to Waco, a reaction that ultimately led him to declare his own personal war on his own government.
Shaken, disillusioned, angered, that could happen in this country where our core beliefs are freedom and liberty. And what did you do to these people? You deprived them of life, liberty, and property. You didn't guarantee those rights, you deprived them of them.
McVeigh had been visiting with his old Army buddy, Terry Nichols, when the Branch Davidian compound exploded in flames.
He described to us running into the house of Terry Nichols and seeing the Waco compound burning, seeing tanks smashing up against the building. And we asked him one time if there was any one turning point, would that be it? And he thought about it a while, and he said, if there was a turning point, that had to be it.
McVeigh and Nichols would build a 7,000-pound bomb and target the unprotected Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. Dirty for dirty, McVeigh would say, quoting the lyrics of a song of revenge.
If government is the teacher, violence would be an acceptable option.
He hates the United States government with a passion. He has no qualms, no grievances against the American people, but he absolutely despises the FBI, the ATF, the DEA. He believes that they've just been excessive in their treatment of American citizens.
This is just devastating. And we are on.
We need help. It may be a federal building, I'm not sure. We got damage in
Hello.
Hi, that's our auditor.
I'm from the neighborhood auditor.
A glimpse into the lives of office workers at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, making light of the daily routine.
With all my credit union experience, over 5 years, this is what I do all day.
They are like family, kidding with one another.
There's Claudette.
Hi.
This is Colleen. She's a loan officer. Come on, tell us your...
And just feeling comfortable around each other.
And there goes Tony, one of our board of directors. Ooh, important man.
How could they know they would be targeted by a man who despised their employer, the federal government? A man who casually walked into a McDonald's restaurant for a piece of apple pie the night before the bombing. A man who turned his rented Ryder truck into a 3.5-ton bomb. Timothy McVeigh's weapon of mass destruction ripped into the Murrah Federal Building at 9:02 a.m. on Wednesday, April 19th, 1995.
Don't know what happened, just a blast. Move out!
It was the second anniversary of Waco.
We've had an explosion. We need help. This is the fire department.
Can you tell me your name?
Adam 24 Echoes. We're 97. We got damage and injuries all up and down Broadway.
And I heard this loud blast, and it sounded like a bomb or something.
Everybody, let's get out of here. Now. Watch the electricity line.
As Oklahoma City was thrown into chaos, McVeigh made his getaway. But at 10:20 that morning, about 80 miles north of the crime scene, he was pulled over in the old beaten-up Mercury he was driving. He had no license plate and would later say he expected to be caught. It was Oklahoma State Trooper Charles Hanger who arrested McVeigh and took away the gun, ammunition, and knife he was carrying.
I don't feel like a hero. I just did my job. Troopers out there on the road every day and other law enforcement officers that do the same thing. I'm no different than they are.
2 days after the bombing, McVeigh made his debut on the news during his transfer from Perry, Oklahoma to Oklahoma City. FBI agents had tied McVeigh to the rental of the Ryder truck after the rear axle carrying the identification number was found near the blast site. McVeigh showed no emotion.
You go into a mode where you try to block external stimuli out. You're gearing up for anything to happen mentally, but at the same time, you're putting on your poker face.
Rescue workers would have to see the faces of the dead and maimed. 168 dead, more than 500 injured. America would have to bear the heartache of mothers and fathers whose babies were among the 19 children killed.
Daddy, don't get cashews. Trace, you gonna go play with Morgan?
What do you do when people ask you, do you have children? What do you say? Well, I did have children. My children are dead. What do you say? You don't know what to say. Angel.
It's horrible to say, but I have to keep myself from thinking about my own kids most of the time.
2 years earlier, the World Trade Center in New York City had been car bombed. 6 people were killed and thousands were injured. Terrorists from the Middle East were convicted, but this time the killer would be one of our own.
Then it turns out to be what seems to be a good, clean-cut American boy from almost rural America, right here, just outside of Buffalo and Wheatfield. And that was what shocked everybody.
McVeigh's lead attorney, Stephen Jones, would attempt to show his client as a regular guy, the old Tim McVeigh, with a smile and a sense of humor. In this video, never seen before, McVeigh even jokes with Jones, wondering why Jones's face didn't break the television camera.
Well, I figure that's the ultimate test for the camera. If it doesn't break for you, it's okay.
But during his trial, McVeigh rarely showed any emotion, especially toward his victims.
Do you believe your son is this monster that the government has made him out to be?
No.
You just don't want to believe it, or
well, that's a tough question to answer, you know. If he's a monster, it's just within the last few years.
Just want him to live.
McVeigh's sister Jennifer was made to testify for the prosecution, revealing her brother had told her something big was going to happen. Tim's former Army buddy, Michael Fortier, who had known about the bombing plans, saved his own neck by testifying against McVeigh. On June 2nd, 1997, the world awaited the verdict.
That's right. We got him.
Marcia Kite, who lost a daughter in the bombing, said she expected the guilty verdict.
When I heard that they were coming out with a verdict, I mean, the adrenaline was going, my heart was pounding. You know, I didn't expect anything else but to hear the word guilty, but still, just to hear that word guilty meant so much.
Janie Coverdale said she had prayed to her grandsons, Aaron and Elijah, whose young lives McVeigh had claimed.
I told them that the man that hurt them would never hurt anybody else. And I think they hurt me.
There's nothing we can do to him here that's bad enough, severe enough, that's fair enough. But this might get him there sooner.
Bill McVeigh and Tim's mother had stayed away from the criminal phase of the trial, but when the question of the death penalty came before the jury, they knew they had to try and save their son's life. Bill McVeigh tried to get the jury to see the Tim he had raised, but in court, Mr. McVeigh felt so sorry for the Oklahoma City victims, he couldn't even look at their faces.
It's awful tough. In fact, I didn't want to turn around because of that. I feel sorry for all of them. No.
Tim's mother talked about a loving son and a happy child growing up. She said she was pleading for her son's life. Jennifer also took the stand, letting her brother know that despite everything, she still cared a lot about him.
Just that I love him and I'm here to support him and I don't want him to die.
But the overwhelming evidence of the misery McVeigh caused, like this critically burned boy who must breathe through a tube, and the ripple effect of the lives he destroyed, convinced the jury to give McVeigh the death penalty.
He took my son Rick from me. You know, and I want him to be put to death for what he's done to everybody.
My feeling is the same. It's necessary that Timothy McVeigh is executed, not in revenge for what he did in Oklahoma City, but to prevent him from hurting somebody else.
As for McVeigh, he still showed no remorse.
If you had your life to live over, is there anything you'd do differently?
I've thought about that quite a few times, and I think anybody in life says, I wish I could have gone back and done this differently, done that differently. There are moments, but no one that stands out.
And sticking a needle in somebody's arm and putting them to sleep doesn't seem like justice to me.
Even among the families that lost loved ones in the bombing, there are those who believe that the death penalty is just a form of government-sanctioned violence.
Here's my favorite picture.
Oh, that's
Julie.
beautiful.
Yeah, that's her high school graduation picture.
Bud Welsh, who lost his daughter Julie in the blast, has traveled around the country speaking out against the death penalty.
We must stop the circle of violence. We must understand what an execution is. An execution is an event. It's staged. And when we end up killing Tim McVeigh, we will end up with a staged political event. It does nothing more or less for our society than that.
Talking to someone. Even for McVeigh, his own death sentence drove home his belief that the government commits violent acts in the name of justice.
What are we doing with the death penalty? It appears they use violence as an option all the time.
But a USA Today poll finds that 59% of Americans generally support the death penalty and believe McVeigh deserved it. 22% generally oppose the death penalty but supported it in the case of McVeigh, while 16% generally oppose capital punishment even in McVeigh's case.
But this is a fellow who didn't care, who was willing to take human life in enormous numbers, and he's going to have to pay with his own life.
9-year-old Clint Seidel, who lost his mother Kathy in the explosion, seemed to favor the death penalty for McVeigh without a second thought.
And that just won't be right if he don't get the death penalty, because he killed 168 people, and that's just not right. You just don't get off that easy.
Though lethal injection is said to be the most humane method of putting a person to death, opponents say killing is killing, no matter what method is used.
I am opposed to to capital punishment under any circumstances.
American culture professor Bruce Jackson, who made a study of death row inmates in Texas in the late 1970s, came to the conclusion that capital punishment debases all of society.
For government to do in tranquility what these bad guys do in their madness or in their passion, some people find as evil as what the bad guys are doing. That's the argument against the death penalty.
And for those who knew that Tim McVeigh during the innocent years, the execution is just too much to bear.
I feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for his father, mother. He's a good kid. Every time I talk, I start to cry about him. Really do.
Because there's nothing
I can do.
But almost everyone, especially those who attend Good Shepherd Church, where Tim once prayed, seem to feel there was more Timothy McVeigh could have done to try and save himself, or at least his soul.
Pray for those who lost their lives in Oklahoma City.
He made it easier for those who support the death penalty because of his refusal to say he was sorry. And for those who believe he still has one more judgment day ahead, their final advice was predictable.
You better pray. And pray hard. All the time you're not doing anything else, pray.
Turned against the government sometime.
Bill McVeigh still loves the flag, but took it down 4 days before his son's execution. 4 weeks ago, filled with anguish, he talked to me about those documents suddenly produced by the FBI.
I don't understand why it come out now, after 4 years. You know, the trial was 4 years ago. This was another giant mistake by the FBI. That's what it looks like. It could have been just an accidental mistake. They claim that's what it is, but I don't know if it is or not.
Tim McVeigh, in the book American Terrorist, admitted he is the Oklahoma City bomber, but he told his father during an April prison visit that he would not say he's sorry.
He told me that if he apologized, it would be a lie. So he said he wasn't going to.
Since his son's trial, Bill McVeigh has been trying to lead as normal an existence as possible.
Get up 6 o'clock, go golfing, get home at noon, face reporters and phone calls the rest of the day, try to work in your yard. Maybe 10 minutes you can get out there, maybe you can't. That's about it.
But generally, his father held out little hope that even with the stay of execution, his son would beat the death penalty.
Inevitable. It's going to happen. That's my feeling.
Why do you feel that way?
Huh? Because he admitted his guilt, and that's the way it's going to be.
And sensing the inevitable, Bill McVeigh knew the extra month would be extra painful.
Well, it's another 30 days for Tim, but it's going to be another tough 30 days, like starting over again.
What do you mean by that, Bill?
Well, here we are, 4 weeks away, and it's going to be 4 weeks of hell.
While many of the survivors of Oklahoma City have felt sorry for Bill McVeigh, they were furious that Tim's execution had been delayed. Bill McVeigh understood their anguish and said publicly to them the words his son could not find in his heart.
I'm sorry. That's all I can say.
This is the son Bill McVeigh thinks about these days, the Timmy he knew before he went off to war in the Persian Gulf, and before the siege at Waco, Texas, the flashpoint for Tim McVeigh, who called the federal agents there nothing more than snipers in a non-war situation.
I think about Timmy, and that's the one before he went in the service. I call him Timmy, and he's Tim now. That's what I think about when he was a kid and full of fun and everything else, and that's the one I think of.
You still see that Timmy when you visit him in prison?
Yes, I do.
And that's the Timmy he shows you?
Yes, it is. Yes, we have good visits. Full of fun, talk about whatever we want to, and can't say we have a good time because we're in prison, but it isn't that bad. It isn't bad.
Bill McVeigh said his final face-to-face goodbye to his son in April during a visit to death row, but said he didn't know how he would handle things the day of Tim's execution.
We'll see what happens when the day comes. I don't know how it's going to affect me, and we'll find out. We won't worry about it till the day gets here.
Despite Tim's horrific deeds, Bill's message to his son is simple and direct.
I love you, Tim. That's about it.
Timothy McVeigh considered his execution a state-assisted suicide. It was part of his plan from the very beginning to have the federal government take his life. Somewhere in the twists and turns of fate, McVeigh lost his innocence, and by taking the lives of 168 of his fellow Americans, robbed the country of its innocence. For now we know that terror can strike from within, without warning and without remorse. I'm Rich Newberg. Good night.
One half the building is scared away, the entire side.
What happens in Oklahoma City is one of our own is the one who does it. Who are the bad guys? Who are the good guys?
You need to look evil deeds right in the eye to understand them and hopefully thwart them from happening in the future.
Get him back!
It's not over. It's not over until he's dead, as far as I'm concerned.
You wanted to go. And it's going to be, it seems to me, an example to the world that when somebody creates or gets involved in a heinous crime, you got to pay the price.
What do you do? I mean, do you kill people to stop them from killing people? You're killing people. That's what it's about.
If he's a monster, it's just within the last few years.
I think somehow he has been able to put this bombing in the context of a military mission and put himself in the context of just being a soldier carrying out the mission. And as far as the bombing goes, and that is the defining moment of his life, I don't think he has a conscience about it.